I never thought one sentence could change the way an entire company looked at me. But that's exactly what happened the morning I opened my performance review and saw it sitting there like a quiet accusation. Not a team player. No explanation. No examples. No context. Just 4 words, dropped into a document that HR calls a collaborative evaluation, but everyone knows is used to shape who gets promoted, who gets sidelined, and who gets pushed out. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Maybe because it didn't make sense. Or maybe because it made too much sense. Let me back up first. I'd been in that department for a little over 5 years. I wasn't loud, I wasn't political, and I definitely wasn't one of those people who treated every meeting like a stage. My strength was quieter, fixing things before they became problems, spotting inconsistencies in client deliverables, mentoring new analysts so they didn't drown in their first month, taking the messy, unglamorous tasks everyone avoided but everyone relied on. I wasn't the star, I was the spine, and the spine doesn't get much applause. My manager, Claire, liked people she could control. She praised confidence as long as it followed her script, not when it came from someone with their own thoughts. I'd seen her sideline 2 other people before me, one who asked too many questions and one who politely disagreed with her in a team meeting. Neither lasted long. Looking back, the signs were already there. I just didn't want to believe them. For months, I'd been covering for gaps in our client reports because Claire kept delaying sign-offs. She'd forget numbers, ask me to reframe sections to match whatever she promised the director that week. It was never illegal, never fraudulent, just sloppy and politically motivated. Every time I cleaned it up, and every time she treated it as expected. The shift happened the day I finally said no. We were 2 days from a quarterly deadline. Claire dumped a half-finished data set on my desk at 5:48 p.m. and said, "Can you polish this tonight? It needs to go out in the morning." Except it wasn't polish, it was redo, and the mistakes weren't mine. I told her plainly, I can work late, but I can't guarantee accuracy by morning if I start from scratch. We'll risk sending something unreliable. She gave me that tight smile, the kind she uses when she thinks she's being generous, but is actually warning you. "Well," she said, "a team player would find a way." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't push back. I just said, "Then we need more time or more help." That was it. No drama, no conflict. But something in her expression shifted. A calculation, or maybe a decision. 2 days later, the review dropped. Not a team player. I should have seen it coming. But nothing prepares you for the moment you realize your manager is quietly rewriting who you are. I closed the document, took a long breath, and walked into the office, pretending everything was normal. But the floor felt different that day. People looked at me a little too long, or avoided eye contact entirely. I caught snippets of whispers. Someone closed a Slack channel thread when I walked by, and then my calendar pinged. A meeting invite. 8:30 a.m., no agenda, just alignment chat, Claire plus HR. Those meetings aren't discussions. They're verdicts wrapped in polite voices. I sat at my desk, waiting for 8:30, trying to piece together how saying one reasonable sentence had turned into this. For a moment, I wondered if maybe everyone believed Claire's line. Maybe I had been too quiet, too focused, too unwilling to play the office politics she thrived on. But then something happened that told me I wasn't as alone as Claire wanted me to think. At 8:12 a.m., Marco from the analytics team stopped by my desk. He never stops by this early. He barely talks before coffee. But he leaned against the divider and said quietly, "You good?" I nodded, pretending I didn't know what he meant. He looked at me for a second, shook his head, and murmured, "She's been planting seeds. For weeks. People notice more than you think." Then he walked away before I could answer. And that was the moment. The exact moment. I understood something Claire never planned for. Whatever story she'd written about me, half the floor had been watching her write it. I thought the Oak 30 meeting would decide my future. I didn't know yet that by 9:14 a.m., The whole situation would turn upside down, and not because of anything I said, but because of what the team did. When 8:30 finally came, I walked into that glass conference room trying to look calm. Inside, Claire sat with her laptop open, posture straight, expression perfectly neutral, the kind she uses when she wants people to think she's being professional. HR was there too, a woman named Denise, who always smiled like she was trying to soften the blow of whatever she was about to say. They offered me water. I declined. People only offer water when they know the conversation won't be pleasant. Claire started. She always starts. She hates not controlling the narrative. We've been reviewing collaboration patterns across the team, she said, fingers laced like she was delivering a quarterly speech. And we've noticed some hesitance on your part to support urgent priorities. I didn't interrupt. Interruption is just ammunition in these conversations. She continued, we need people who step up without questioning, especially in a fast-moving environment. I waited a beat before responding. Calm, even. I've stepped up for 5 years. You know that. You also know I won't sign off on anything inaccurate just to meet an artificial timeline. Claire smiled, a small, sharp one. There it is again, the rigidity. Denise typed something on her tablet, probably a summary that would later be rephrased into something like employee shows resistance to feedback. I leaned back slightly. If the issue is accuracy, let's review the project. If the issue is communication, I'm open to feedback. But calling me not a team player for pointing out risks, that's not collaborative. That's punitive. Denise cleared her throat. We're not here to punish. We're here to align expectations. Whose expectations? I asked. It wasn't confrontational, just honest. For the first time, Claire's expression wavered. Barely, but enough. Because the truth was simple. The only expectation she wanted was obedience. Quiet, invisible obedience. She shifted back to the script. Improvement is possible. We'll set up a performance plan to help. And that was when the door opened. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a simple, deliberate push. And in walked someone I didn't expect. Our senior data engineer, Rob, holding a tablet, breathing slightly heavier like he'd walked fast to get here. He wasn't invited. He wasn't on the calendar. He wasn't even on Claire's side of the org chart. Before Claire could speak, he said, Hey, sorry to interrupt, but if this meeting is about collaboration issues, you should see this first. Claire blinked. This is a private... He turned the tablet to face her. On the screen was a dashboard, our internal task logs, specifically her approvals, or rather, her lack of approvals. Rob's voice stayed calm, almost too calm. These delays aren't on him, Claire. They're on you. The system timestamps everything. Director Alvarez asked me this morning why our throughput is dropping. I checked. And, well, he looked at me just for a second. Not pity. Acknowledgement. Claire's face tightened. Rob, this is irrelevant. We're discussing attitude and communication, not... It's directly relevant, he said, not raising his voice, but not giving an inch. If you're framing his caution as a performance issue, the data should back it up. It doesn't. Denise looked between them, visibly confused. She wasn't expecting data. HR never expects data. And here's what made the moment even more interesting. Rob didn't report to Claire. He barely interacted with her. But he interacted with everyone else. He'd seen the same pattern Marco hinted at. And apparently others had too. Claire tried to recover. This is being taken out of context. We had last-minute client needs that required flexibility. Rob tapped the screen. No, these weren't last-minute. They were bottlenecks you didn't clear for 8, 10, 13 days at a time. That's not him refusing to collaborate. That's you blocking him. The room went quiet. You know that silence in offices? Not the peaceful kind. The kind that tells you something just shifted, and you can't unshift it. Claire exhaled sharply. We can discuss this later, for now. But she didn't finish the sentence, because Denise, suddenly aware of the implications, closed her tablet and said carefully, Maybe we should pause this meeting until we review the full workflow history. Claire's eyes flicked toward her. That wasn't the outcome she wanted. I didn't gloat. I didn't push. I didn't even look at Claire. All I said was, "I'm available anytime." And then a notification popped up on Claire's laptop, loud enough for all of us to hear, a Slack message from the general team channel. One sentence, "Is everything okay? We saw the invite." Claire's face drained slightly. Because in our office, when people start watching, the story stops being so easy to rewrite. She shut her laptop. "Fine. We'll reconvene later." I walked out of that room knowing one thing. Whatever Claire thought this morning would be, it wouldn't be. And the day was just getting started. Because by 9:14 a.m., something happened on the floor she never expected. I walked out of that meeting with my pulse steady, but my thoughts all over the place. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger comes when you feel you're fighting something. What I felt was something colder. Clarity. The hallway felt different. Too quiet for that hour. Normally the office is a mess of keyboards, coffee machines, and people complaining about morning stand-ups. But today it was as if the entire floor was waiting for something. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and tried to breathe. I expected Slack messages, whispers, maybe the kind of cautious glances people give someone who's been talked to. But what happened wasn't that. At 9:02 a.m., Marco dropped into my DMs. "How did the meeting go?" I typed back. "Still ongoing." Paused until further review. He replied almost instantly. "Good. Then don't move. Something's happening." My first instinct was confusion. My second was suspicion. Not of Marco, but of the situation. I'd spent years watching how politics spread through a department like slow poison, but I'd also watched how resentment builds in the shadows until someone finally breaks the silence. At 9:07 a.m., I noticed something unusual on the floor. People weren't working. They were watching Claire's office, and Claire's office was empty. Her bag, laptop, jacket, all still inside, but she wasn't there. At 9:10 a.m., a message hit the team channel. Quick sync at 9:14 a.m. by the main conference room. Mandatory. Sent not by Claire, not by HR, but by Director Alvarez. My stomach tightened. Directors do not call sudden meetings. Not unless something's wrong. Very wrong. I stood up slowly, grabbed my notebook, even though I knew I wouldn't need it, and walked toward the conference room with the rest of the team. The air felt electric, like the seconds before a summer storm breaks open. When we reached the room, Alvarez was already inside. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't angry. He looked disappointed. And behind him on the wall-mounted screen was a dashboard I recognized instantly. The same task log and timestamp summary Rob had brought into the 8:30 meeting. Only now it was expanded. Every delay, every stalled approval, every bottleneck, every urgent request Claire blamed on me, and every single one of them traced back to her. Alvarez waited until everyone settled in. Then he said, slowly and clearly, "I asked each of you to stop by this room today because I've spent the last hour reviewing something deeply concerning." The room didn't move. Someone breathed too loudly. Someone else clicked a pen once and then froze. Alvarez continued, "I've seen performance friction before. I've seen personality conflicts. But what I saw this morning wasn't that. It was pattern manipulation." He tapped the screen. The data points pulsed like a heartbeat. "She was creating delays and assigning responsibility elsewhere, and many of you were impacted." There it was, said out loud, by the person Claire had always tried to impress, the person she thought she could fool. He turned to the room. "Before I make any decisions as director, I need to know something. Did any of you notice this behavior?" Silence. Then one by one, people spoke. A quiet analyst named Jenna raised her hand first. She stopped replying to my approval pings for 3 weeks, then told me I wasn't being proactive. Another voice. "She told me to reroute my questions to him," she nodded toward me, saying he needed to learn accountability. Someone else. "She unassigned tasks from him and reassigned them to new hires, saying he lacked initiative. which didn't make sense. And then Marco. She's been trying to isolate him for months. Some of us tried to bring it up, but you know how she reacts. Alvarez nodded, not surprised, not shocked. More like someone who just confirmed what he already suspected. What I remember most is this. Not one person defended Claire. Not one. She'd built her authority on fear and subtle pressure. She hadn't realized that fear has a half-life, and it decays the moment someone stops obeying. Alvarez exhaled. Thank you. That's all I needed. He glanced at his watch. It was 9:14 a.m., and then something happened that I'll never forget. He closed the dashboard and said, "If the team feels this way, I want you all to step outside with me. Right now." People looked at each other. No one moved for a moment. Then Marco stood. Then Jenna. Then the analysts. Then the engineers. One by one, almost the entire department rose to their feet and followed me, not Claire, out of the conference room. Something broke inside me then, not in a painful way, more like the moment a truth finally clicks into place. I wasn't not a team player. I'd been carrying people who were too afraid to say what they actually saw. They weren't walking out because of me. They were walking out because the story Claire had built around me wasn't strong enough to hide the truth anymore. And for the first time that morning, I felt something that wasn't confusion or frustration or dread. I felt the ground shifting under Claire's feet, and she hadn't even realized it yet. The hallway outside the conference room felt unreal. Not because anything dramatic happened, no shouting, no confrontations, but because of the silence. 20 people walking together without speaking is louder than any argument. Alvarez stood at the front, hands clasped, jaw tight. He looked like a man who just discovered a fire burning behind a wall and was now trying to get everyone out before the structure collapsed. We stopped near the open workspace. He turned to us and said, "I want to talk to her before we go any further, but I need you all here in case she denies what's already been shown." No one objected. No one left. We were standing in a loose half-circle when Claire's heels clicked into the hallway. She was returning from the restroom, coffee in hand, scrolling through her phone, completely unaware of what she was walking into. She looked up, startled to see the team clustered together. "What's going on?" she asked, voice tight with controlled irritation. Alvarez stepped forward. "Claire, I need to speak with you. Now." She didn't like his tone. You could see it. Claire prefers conversations where she controls the temperature, where she decides who should feel small. But she followed him anyway. They walked into the nearest small conference room. Alvarez didn't close the blinds, and for once, Claire didn't have the power to hide behind a closed door. From where we stood, we could see everything. Not hear, but see. The gestures, the posture, the shift in expressions, and sometimes that tells you more than words. At first, Claire looked firm, chin high, arms crossed, the confident body language she wore like armor. Then Alvarez turned his laptop toward her. The same dashboard, the same timestamps. Only now, it wasn't just data. He'd added audit notes, email threads, Slack conversations, and workflow trails that clearly showed when she'd stalled, redirected, or manipulated tasks. Claire's confidence cracked, not shattered. Not yet, but cracked. She shook her head, started explaining something. Her hands moved more quickly. She pointed toward the window at us. She pointed at the screen. She leaned forward. She leaned back. Classic signs of someone realizing the story they prepared is incompatible with the evidence placed in front of them. Then Alvarez slid a printed document across the table. I recognized it immediately. Her written statement about my collaboration issues. He'd pulled the metadata. There it was, the timestamp showing when she wrote it. A full week before the incident, she claimed triggered it. She hadn't reacted to what happened that night. She had been planning the narrative long before. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a setup, and Alvarez had just presented the proof. Claire's posture collapsed. Not dramatically, just enough that her shoulders dipped and her breath paused. She brushed her hair back, but her hand trembled slightly. She was losing the room, losing the story, losing the authority she never imagined could be questioned. And then something unexpected happened. She stood up, stormed out of the conference room, and marched straight toward us. "Is this a joke?" she snapped. "A coordinated ambush." Her voice was sharp enough to cut through the entire floor. No one answered, because the anger wasn't scaring anyone anymore. She pointed at me first. Of course she did. "You went behind my back. You undermined leadership. You—" But Alvarez exited the conference room behind her and cut her off. "No, he didn't." Claire spun around. Alvarez's tone was calm, controlled, but unmistakably final. "The team came forward because they've been experiencing the same pattern. This is not insubordination. This is accountability." Claire tried to laugh, a short, breathy, disbelieving sound. "You can't honestly take their side over mine. They're upset about deadlines. That's normal. That's part of leadership." Alvarez stared at her for a long moment. Then he said something I will never forget. "Leadership isn't measured by how well people obey you. It's measured by whether they follow you without being asked." He gestured toward us. "Look around." Claire turned and saw something she had never truly seen before. 20 people standing together, and not one of them standing with her. Something in her expression hollowed out. The mask slipped. She looked suddenly small. Her voice dropped, quieter but sharper. "So that's how it is." No one spoke. Then she made the mistake of saying, "I should have documented all of you. Every single attitude issue. Every refusal. Every complaint." That was the moment. The exact moment. When everyone understood, Claire hadn't been incompetent. She had been doing exactly what she intended. Building leverage, creating dependency, controlling outcomes. But she'd underestimated how closely people watch when their dignity is threatened. Alvarez finally stepped beside her, voice firm. "Claire, I'm placing you on administrative leave effective immediately. HR will escort you to collect your items." Denise approached slowly, hands clasped, trying to look neutral. Claire didn't move at first. She just stared at the floor, jaw clenched, breathing uneven. Then her eyes flicked to me. Hatred, not loud, not explosive, cold. "You think they came for you," she said softly. "They came for themselves. Don't forget that." She walked away before I could respond. HR followed her. The door closed. The elevator dinged. And just like that, the chaos, the control, the months of subtle manipulation, ended in a quiet hallway at 9:27 a.m. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Marco exhaled and said, "Well, that happened." A ripple of uneasy laughter moved through the floor. Not joy, not yet, but relief. The kind that comes when a storm finally breaks open. And as people slowly returned to their desks, I realized something I hadn't felt in months. Breath. Actual breath. But the day wasn't finished, because Alvarez still had one more meeting. With me. And that conversation would change everything. When the floor finally settled back into something resembling normal work, Alvarez asked me to step into his office. Not urgently, not sternly, just a quiet, level, "Can you join me for a moment?" I followed him in, closed the door behind me, and sat down. He didn't open a laptop. He didn't reach for a file. He rested his hands on the desk and exhaled slowly, like someone who'd spent the morning putting out a fire and was now looking at the damaged blueprint underneath. "I want to be very direct with you," he began. "What happened today was not your fault. It wasn't praise. It wasn't sympathy. It was a statement of fact, the kind that strips away any room for doubt." I nodded. "I appreciate that." He looked at me for a long moment. "You handled everything in that room this morning with restraint. Most people don't stay calm under that kind of pressure." "I didn't feel calm," I admitted. "That's why it matters," he said. "You stayed professional despite the circumstances, and that tells me more about your character than anything in a performance review." For the first time that day, something inside my chest loosened. Not pride, not vindication, just relief. The simple kind that comes when the truth has finally been spoken out. Loud. Alvarez leaned back. I want to understand something clearly. When you pushed back on that deadline, were you refusing or were you protecting the integrity of the report? Protecting it, I said. Sending bad data would have been worse than missing the timeline. He nodded once. That's the answer I expected. He picked up a folder from the corner of his desk and slid it toward me. Inside was a printed log, all my project contributions for the past 2 quarters. Clean, consistent, accurate. Your work speaks for itself, he said, but I won't let what she wrote stay in the system. It took me a moment to process that. He continued. The remark will be removed. HR will correct the documentation, and will be reviewing the rest of her evaluations for similar patterns. I didn't smile, not because I wasn't relieved, but because it felt like the wrong moment for celebration. The morning wasn't about winning. It was about stopping something that had gone on too long. Alvarez clasped his hands. There is one more thing. He paused, not dramatically, but thoughtfully. I'm restructuring the department. We're creating a role for cross-team oversight, someone who understands workflow integrity and isn't afraid to push back when something is wrong. He looked directly at me. I think you're that person. The words landed gently, not like a reward, but like a responsibility being offered rather than imposed. I didn't respond immediately. I thought about the past months, the pressure, the subtle isolation, the whispers I didn't understand at the time, and the moment 20 people stood behind me at 9:14 a.m. without being asked. Finally, I said, if you believe I can help bring stability and transparency, then yes, I want the role. Alvarez nodded. Good. HR will draft the transition plan. This won't happen overnight, but it will happen. As I stood to leave, he added quietly, not a team player? Half the team walked out behind you today. That's the definition of a leader. Walking back to my desk felt different this time, not triumphant, grounded. People glanced up, not out of curiosity, but out of something closer to acknowledgement. Marco rolled over in his chair and muttered, So? Alive? I sat down. Better than alive, he smirked. Yeah, we figured. The workflow channels began buzzing again. People returned to tasks. The floor slowly reset itself. But the tension wasn't fear anymore. It was the echo of something breaking and the space left behind for something new. About an hour later, HR walked Claire out of the building. Quiet, professional, no spectacle. She didn't look at anyone as she left. No one whispered, no one cheered, no one smirked. Because the victory wasn't in watching her go. The victory was that for once the story told in that building matched the truth of what people lived. That evening, after everyone left, I stayed behind a few minutes. I walked through the empty floor, past the conference rooms, past Claire's former office, past the place where everything had almost gone very wrong. I realized something simple but important. The worst part of workplace betrayal isn't the lie someone tells about you. It's the moment you start wondering whether the lie is somehow believable. But the best part of justice? It's not the punishment. It's the clarity that finally lets you breathe again. Before I left, my phone buzzed, a message from Alvarez. Your new responsibilities begin Monday. Welcome aboard. I turned off the lights, stepped into the elevator, and exhaled. Not anger, not revenge, not triumph. Just peace. Earned, steady peace. And as the doors closed, I realized something else. I wasn't not a team player. I'd simply outgrown the team that wanted me small. And the people who mattered walked out behind me when it counted.